Welcome to Idea to IPO. Hello, my name is Rob. I organize Idea to IPO. We've been holding events in Silicon Valley for many, many years. We launched officially on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members and no events on our calendar. At this stage, we have over 100,000 members among all our meetup groups all around the world. We've organized, promoted, and produced over 2,471 events. By any standard, by any measure, we're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in the history of Silicon Valley, bar none. We organize venture capital panels, legal workshops, and more. These days, we're 100% online. We have an event nearly every day of the week. Check out our schedule at ideatoipo.com. At this point, I'm going to hand it off to our distinguished moderator, Chris Simpson. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to those who are on the East Coast. My name is Chris Simpson. I am a partner in the Venture Capital and Emerging Growth Practice Group at Polsinelli PC, which is a national law firm. I help clients in the life science, biotech, and ag tech space from startup to IPO or exit. Really excited to be speaking with you all today and moderating a panel of some really fantastic people who are experts in the biotech field. I'd like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And so I'm going to start with Dr. Oren Aloni-Charas, who is the CEO and managing partner of Global Health Impact Fund.
Chris, thank you. Thanks for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Oren Aloni-Charas. Very quick history bio on myself. I'm a physician. I work in San Francisco, actually recently retired, but I'm an anesthesiologist with 25 years of clinical practice. I've been involved in the venture space for 5 years, and I'm now managing partner at the Global Health Impact Fund. We're a fund that's clinician founded and clinician run with a lot of entrepreneurial experience and a terrific portfolio. And we're still raising money to close out our first portfolio, but we're just about there and we're opening our next portfolio. So if you have any interest, I'd be happy to chat with you after the meeting.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Aloni-Charas. Anna Fokina, could you introduce yourselves? You are senior associate at DCVC Bio.
Yes, so hi everybody, thank you for joining us. I work at DCVC Bio, have been there since the very inception, which was back in 2018. So we are an early stage fund focused on biotech and agriculture. We invest usually, we have a pretty concentrated portfolio companies, so we tend to take a board seat and along with our portfolio companies. And my background is a little bit more financial. So I did M&A, and then also I worked for a little bit at 2 different hedge funds across a lot of different segments, including healthcare and biotech. And then I moved to San Francisco and worked at Monsanto Growth Ventures in agriculture. And after that, pretty much our entire team, including myself, launched the fund. I joined the fund full time. I'm not a co-founding partner. And to date, we have 17 portfolio companies. And raised our second fund, and today manage over 550 million of assets under management.
Great, thank you very much, Anna. Next up is Dr. Ella Lee, partner at ZGC Innovation Fund.
Yes, it's really great to be here. So my name is Ella Lee, and I'm the partner of ZGC Innovation Fund, and I'm also the VP of ZGC Capital Corporation. Our parent company is ZDG that oversees Z Park as the largest tech hub in China, and our parent company is also one of the largest Chinese SOE, state-owned enterprise in China. So myself is managing several funds, including Fund of Fund, and also a direct VC fund that targets at innovation in the global range. Actually, the goal of next year is also to collaborate with another healthcare fund to continue our investment. So myself is a scientist turned venture capitalist, and I have 15 years experience in biotech sectors, and I have special interest in therapeutic opportunities from drug discovery to commercialization stage. And myself also look at the deals from AI, medtech, clean energy, and also IoT sectors.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. And as everyone knows who is participating on this call live, we solicited feedback as to whether or not they're entrepreneurs or investors. It looks like an overwhelming majority of the folks that are participating live are entrepreneurs. The focus of this call is to talk about innovations in biotech, and specifically, I think the panel will be focusing and touching upon the impact of COVID on biotech and early stage companies, as well as perhaps delving into a little bit about early stage companies that are interested in COVID-19 products. So I think that the very first question that I would put to the group, and Anna, I'll start with you, is the ever esoteric question: what does biotech mean?
Great question. Well, I think, I guess if you just give a definition, it would be, I think people historically thought of it, well, there's pharma and there's biotech, right? Some companies focus on kind of more small molecules, and companies focus on larger molecules, drugs, and more from kind of manufacturing perspective, what's harder, what's easier, and approaches are different. I think today that term is really a mix, because you'll find companies that are both pharma and kind of biotech, and developing both types of drugs. So it is, I would say, just a newer, usually I think it has a correlation of being a little bit smaller, being a little bit more nimble, and more innovative. But this is basically a field where you combine science and these days also more and more technology. So it becomes more of a tech buy in a way as well. So that's kind of how I think about biotech, at least in terms of the Silicon Valley and innovation perspective.
That's great. Dr. Lee, Dr. Aloni-Char, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think this is pretty thorough of what Anna just said. So as you can tell from the name, biotech is just a technology based on the biology. So it uses living organism. They use cells, organelles, animals, or humans to make the product. And application-wise, is not only applied to the field of medicine and pharmaceuticals, but it can be also used in other fields such as agriculture, clean energy, food production, and also agriculture genomics. So health tech is also, we usually call this digital tech or also medtech. And it's a broader sector compared to biotech, and it can also include the wearable device, AI, telemedicine, personalized medicine, health IT, and compared to biotech is more focused on the personal and also preventative care. So there is some overlapping between the healthcare or health tech and also biotech, but there's also like a major difference between the two concepts.
Oren, you're mute.
Sorry about that. I'll endorse both of those both of those answers. I think the only thing I might add is that I look at it a little bit reverse, which is that bio in general is pharma and so forth. This is how technology influences biology. And so it sort of has that little bit of a spin, and maybe you almost think of the technology first. such as in small molecule discovery and things like that. But honestly, I think that I've never really considered them fundamentally to be very different as a matter of practical thinking.
Understood. Thanks very much. So, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has radically changed how funds go about looking for companies to invest in. Curious to hear about your experiences from February of 2020 to now, and how your procedures have evolved, and what you expect to occur for the foreseeable future, and when you think that you, if ever, may get back to pre-COVID approaches to investments. And Dr. Lee, I'll start with you if that's okay.
Sure. So, so I think probably I can say from the
You mute. I think it just went on mute in the middle of. I can just take over for now while Ella's figuring out. But you know, I think the core of the question is how COVID impacted investment activity and whether that's going to change, and how will we continue investing in the longer term. I think, you know, biotech and agriculture are those fields that were not drastically impacted by COVID. These fields considered essential. So I think even from just day-to-day activity, a lot of the labs were still open. Maybe they closed for a little bit, but they kind of came back to more or less functioning state relatively fast. And, you know, from our portfolio perspective, I think there has been very little disruption. Unlike, you know, more kind of tech focused or consumer focused companies, I think there's been a lot more disruption that occurred due to COVID. And so in terms of the investment activity, I think that didn't impact it as much either. The only thing I think there's kind of psychology, people do like to meet companies, investors, by people I mean investors like to meet companies, investors like to do in-field diligence, go to the site, go to the lab, go to the company, see what they're actually doing. And this has been really tough to do due to the quarantine. And so what has been happening in my view is that investors have been more focused on companies that they met before or people they know, the founders that they met before. So there's already sort of pre-checked process that has been done in the past, and you kind of need to validate the technology which you can do over the phone. In certain instances, we also had people who live in those regions, like say Boston, for example, that we would leverage our network for them to go and meet companies or check out their manufacturing processes. And so you become more creative for sure, but it's still limiting, right? Like you still long-term want to be able to do a lot of these key steps yourself, at least for an investor who is a lead investor, who takes a very active role in the diligence process. And so long-term, I think that is somewhat unsustainable. In the short term, I think that didn't impact a biotech and agriculture industry as much. So I'm definitely hopeful that we will come out of the pandemic relatively soon, and that's gonna bring us back to kind of more normal, I guess, ways of doing diligence and meeting companies.
That's great. Thank you, Anna. Dr. Lee, are you able to hear me? And if you are, would you like to go ahead and try again after being cut off?
So sorry about that. I just like trying to reboot that. So so I would just like to add a little bit more. So I think this is actually might be also a great opportunity, not only for the entrepreneurs who could look for opportunities that are coming from new sectors or more capital pour into the pandemic sensitive sectors. But also as an investor is also a maybe chance to let us get used to the new style to communicate with entrepreneurs. So traditionally, investors do not like to invest in companies that is not really from local. Because we're thinking like this, bonding is really, really important. But because of all this isolation, 1 year time, we just are forced to look at the deals and also chat with all the companies that is not from our own zone. And this is time we also realize is actually global investment could be easier. And even I would also see ourselves after the whole pandemic thing, we probably could also like take advantage of this virtual travel method to looking at all the deal in a global wise. And also I know some investors also talking about use drone to also looking at some manufacturing facilities of certain startup company. So for the operation perspective, actually, especially in the after the beginning of this crisis, a lot of clinical trial just stopped because themselves are also struggling to deal with all this, the whole thing. So the funding and also the whole regulation process also got to slow down. But actually, if you're looking at the number of the whole biotech investment in the first 3 quarters of the year, is not significantly decreased. The second quarter is a slightly less than the first quarter, but first quarter is almost like a $5 billion investment in the biotech sector, and that is already hit a record high. So I do see. Moving forward, going to next year, there will the number of the biotech going public, getting the investment will be back to the normal range. So right now, we all see also a lot of biotech company in not only public sector but also private sector have a lower and lower valuation. And this is a lot of investors, especially in the last quarter, are waiting to see how the price also goes, just waiting to let this happen. But I also, my feeling is very soon, going back, moving forward next year, the valuation will also go back to at least how it was before. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, if I could add, in my opinion, it's a good news, bad news scenario. I think there's, things to be thankful for and things to be concerned about. On the good news side, a couple of things. The first thing is that there is a renewed interest in healthcare. Like, it is clearly at the top of everybody's mind, and people are seeing that there are opportunities, and these opportunities scale. They affect everybody. They affect everybody globally. So when you invest in a company that has a vaccine for COVID, that's going to go everywhere, and it's going to make you, as an investor, I mean, although that may not be your priority, but that will make you very successful. So I think that's very good news, and that will affect the entire sector, or has in fact affected the sector. The second good news is that when people invest in biotech, they expect there to be a long time with no revenue. So the idea that companies may have some slowdowns, they're in research mode anyway. It's not a volatile investment, so you're not watching the value of your portfolio go up and down, which is good from from an emotional standpoint as an investor. But also, there's no expectation that you need to be in the market. You should be in the lab. You have to be doing your preclinical trials and your drug discovery and your tox trials and things like that. And only later on do you start to get into real clinical trials and in human, and then through FDA and into the market. So the fact that that gets slowed down a little bit, probably in the bigger picture, won't have any significant impact. So that's the good news. The bad news I think, is that at some point you do have to get into your clinical trials, and that's harder to do now. It's harder to get through the IRB. It's harder to get into the hospital. It's harder to get into patients. It's harder to get the number of patients you need to prove your clinical trials. I think at some point, if things are taking a longer time, you have a very big financial risk due to the very large financial ask to get to the point at which you can be in revenue or get acquired. And so again, if we can't expedite things through the process, that may become a problem. So I think that it's a mixed bag. I think all in all, I agree with what Anna and Ella said, that I think it will all in all be favorable for the sector, but I do think there are reasons to be concerned as well.
Understood. Thank you very much. So with respect to early stage companies that are trying to promote or produce COVID-19 panaceas, you just discussed and described how biotech companies have long life cycles. And a lot of early stage companies at this point in time are, not a lot of, but there are certain companies that are trying to produce COVID adjacent products. Curious as to how you see those types of products, coming to market, if at all.
I guess I'll start with this one. My concern is just that it's such a very big field, and we all discussed earlier, we're all seeing a lot of solutions. And so as investors, we have to be good stewards of our limited partners' money. And, it's our job to not only find good companies, but to make a return on investment for our investors. So, government grants and not-for-profits are good at, sort of chasing companies, but we have to add a level of diligence that they don't necessarily have to add. And it's hard to do that because there's so much happening. My bias happens to be that it's harder to see companies that haven't already been in the space, that aren't using things that they've already been working on, being successful in this area. So what I like to see is a foundational knowledge of that expertise that they're ultimately marketing, that they can bring to the table for that product, or for that drug, for that vaccine, whatever it is that they're working on. And we see that with the vaccines that are being developed, you're dealing with very sophisticated players who are bringing vaccines to market, not startups coming out of an academic lab.
Yeah, I would just add, I think you can think about this topic in two different parts. One is there are diagnostics and tools, and two, there therapeutics, right? And the cycle of product development is very different for the two industries. So I think, in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of the companies that started doing testing. And there was just a huge number of inbound that came to us, invest in us. We are the next, testing company. And it's great because I think you do need to have these tests, but at the same time, as an investor, you can't just invest in anything, right? You have to think about the long term. What's next? Like, what after the COVID testing? What is the next indication you're gonna go? Is it the flu? Is it, and do people need this test, right? So it becomes not only the kind of idea of let's help the world. This is, at the end of the day, investing, and it is for profit, and you have the fiduciary responsibility in front of ULPs to deliver the returns as well. So we are a for profit, the same as companies trying to build businesses and make profit on that. And on the other hand, you have therapeutics, which have very long production cycle, right? Like traditionally, a drug, it takes something like 10-15 years for a drug to come to market. I think with the innovation and the new technologies, that process is being accelerated, and you do definitely see great breakthroughs, and that cycle is getting shorter. However, if, you know, January, February, and you just get an idea, I'm going to start a therapeutic company to really create a drug or a vaccine, that is really hard to do. From ground zero in a year, expect you're going to have a product on the market. I mean, that's pretty much, I don't want to say impossible, but this is really, really hard. And I think companies who have been already developing something and they have already an established and proven platform, and they move into let's also develop the drug or let's make a vaccine, they have much higher chances and likelihood, right, of actual success developing it. So then, in a way, when you see a lot of these companies that come to you, oh, I just started this vaccine company and we have this amazing process. Maybe they are even amazing, even outside of purely business model. You look at the competition and capabilities of other companies that are already in the space and that already have potentially connections with large pharma to help manufacture these drugs, right? Like you need to think about not only developing a drug, but also the ability to actually manufacture at scale. And as a startup, this is a really challenging problem to have. So what you should probably do is really to partner with one of the large pharma companies that already has established process, right? And can qualify all of the criteria for safety of the production. And I think those companies have much higher chances of winning. So in a way, it becomes almost straightforward that, you know, if you just following a hype, you're going to come to a venture capital fund and say, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to start it now and I'm going to win the world. I mean, it sounds almost like unrealistic, because in reality, drug manufacturing discovery process is a very, very long cycle process.
Yeah, so it's very complete already. I totally agree that despite of all the surprises, but the fundamental of investment is still not changed, especially in the biotech sector. When we look at a company, we want to looking at the key component of the biotech, which is how much validation data they have already collected. So, well, in this difficult time, is good to be flexible and also to somehow pivot the direction of the company to a more higher demand direction. To benefit even from this whole time. However, if you are not just able to develop a real product, but just use focus on the concept, is just like really difficult to sustain. So there are a lot of companies that are not really coming from the field, but able to get funding support from a lot of resources in the beginning. But actually, when you look at their team and also their asset, it's just as an investor, you can really see the big difference of the newborn such companies compared to the company that is already in the field for a lot of years. So, and also we have to be aware after the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine is produced and also even distributed and injected to the ordinary people. A lot of a startup that even purely focus on the COVID-19 vaccine development will die. So a lot of companies will disappear at that time. So you may also want to especially at this time, thinking if you are just like a newly jumped into the sector because of this sudden pandemic, you want to also think how to change another way to survive in the post-pandemic time.
Understood. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. That's really, really interesting and good insight. Speaking of current events, you know, we had very positive news from Moderna and Pfizer over the past few weeks. curious as to if anyone else on the call would build off of what Dr. Lee just said and talk a little bit about what, if any, impact the vaccine will have on the biotech space writ large, globally and US-wise.
Yeah. So maybe I can start, and also maybe like our two panelists can also jump in to correct me,
Yeah.
if I'm wrong. So I'm a little bit how to say, my understanding from all this studies, human studies that show the high, let's say a recent study done in Arizona recruited like almost 30,000 subjects, and then they tested about how long the antibody could really be around the body after the infection, and they were so excited to find out the long time of the antibody being existing for almost 1 year, actually 5 to 8 months. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about the existence of the antibody, whether that could really protect you from the reinfection of the COVID-19. So you can't just simply saying that because you already have the antibody in the body, therefore you can be protected from the reinfection. It's not really the case for all the diseases. Some diseases, yes, you can. Some diseases is just in some situation, the antibody could just protect you for a milder syndrome, and for some sectors where disease is just like not working. So, well, the exciting news coming out about Pfizer, about Moderna, if we do not really first focus on the distribution issues, but just focus on the efficacy. Oren, you are the expert here, but do you really think that would just protect you from the really let's say 1 year or 2 year? My understanding is it really depends, because I haven't personally looking at the real data of the phase 3 release by Pfizer, but you need to also look at the age and the status of your condition, and also I don't know. I just think it's just a lot of uncertainty out there.
Well, I think, Ella, if I may, I think what's happening is it's being filtered through the media, right? So we have to all of a sudden we have to step back and say, okay, the media has a narrative that fake news. No, it's not fake news, but the media has to understand it the way media does, and we're scientists and experts in the field, and we should be able to look a little bit deeper. And so I think that's what you're saying in some respects. And the way I look at it, the data that I've seen, which is very high level, and I haven't dug it all into it, is that there seems to be a significantly reduced amount of infections in people who got the vaccine in age, at least with the Pfizer vaccine, age over 65, as opposed to people who didn't, who got placebo. That's very promising. But there are a number of things we don't know, right? At least I haven't seen anything else that's just very high level data. We haven't looked, normally if we were going to have a vaccine, you would look at 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You want to look over time at how this vaccine affected the person, the people in the population. We don't have that data. Could this vaccine cause problems in the long term? It's possible. We don't know. I'm not saying it will. I think it's just, as a scientist, we don't know. We don't have that information.
And also, if I may jump in, I think for Pfizer, their study design, they did not really test anything about the reinfection, the protection on the reinfection, right?
So what's the durability of the immunity, right? And we don't know that either. I've heard some people say maybe you'll need, they start to posit again on the air, maybe you'll need a vaccine every year. We don't know that. I think the only thing we do know is that people who've been infected seem to, like with the actual virus, seem to have about a 3-month, as I've seen reported, protection. And after that, their antibody levels wane. But again, to your point, even that, I'm not so sure is so clear, because we're linking these antibodies with infection. And it may be that those antibodies offer some protection against certain aspects of the infection. It might offer complete protection. And it's all new. And Anna, you said something earlier, and I think it's very true in relation to this cycle of just getting a drug to market. The cycle of understanding a disease, 9 months is or a year, or however long we've been really studying this as scientists, that's a very, very short period of time. And so I don't think it would be ridiculous to assume that we will learn a lot more over the year or two and need to change our thinking. And I think we have to have our minds open to that. That being said, I do hope that they're successful. I hope that they're as good as they're being, touted in the press, and that they can help us at least somehow return back to a normal way of life.
Yeah, I'll add that I think there's been a number of polls done whether people would take a vaccine, and surprisingly many people say no. It's I mean, it's, again, it gets back to the fact, well, it was developed so fast that I don't really know whether it's safe or not, even if these companies say yes, because in history there were drugs that were approved and then turned out to be highly toxic for people, right? And I'm not saying that these specific vaccines will be, but I think that that speaks to the psychology of people, right? And especially people in a higher risk category, would they want to take it? Or again, this would increase the risk of some other side effects for them. I don't know. This is a really hard question to answer. And I think there still has to be a combination of a lot of things, like preventative measures still should be there, right? If we have a vaccine, it doesn't mean like all of a sudden we open everything and we go and party like crazy. And I think people should understand it, that probably this will last for longer than what we think, just because you want to get back into like normal activity slowly to make sure that there are no outbursts and third waves, fourth waves. And the other aspect is the virus is mutating. I mean, to be honest, don't know whether the 3 month is due to the antibodies fading off, or this is really the virus is mutating so rapidly, right? And so that's also a question. What if we develop a vaccine and then half a year later, the vaccine is no longer kind of viable for this new mutation, and it becomes more like a flu, right? That every year you have to develop a new vaccine. So I think, again, because this is relatively new, we don't really know. We don't have answers to that. But I'm very hopeful. I think overall, people are very calm, which I'm happy to see, right? And maybe a lot has to do with the government funding and the markets being calm, and there is no crazy economic fluctuations. And people do see this as a temporary kind of problem that will be resolved over time. I do also want to highlight the fact that there are drugs developed, not vaccines, but drugs developed for COVID as well. So again, you want to kind of address all angles, right? A preventative, if people get sick, you want to treat them, but also you want to prevent people from getting sick. So I think if we balance all of that, that'd be a better, probably more lasting solution.
Got it. That's really helpful and very interesting. So we will have a new president in the White House in January 2020. Do any of you foresee the change in the executive branch materially impacting the biotech investment space?
Yeah, I do. I'll start. I wanted to remind everybody that in the Obama administration, obviously when President-elect Biden was the vice president, he spearheaded the moonshot, the cancer moonshot program. I think that he's somebody who is very familiar with the need for innovation and investment, and I'm hoping that will. I haven't seen any position papers from him on that behalf, but I feel like that's just part of his DNA. He's had very personal experiences with the healthcare system and the need for innovation with his son's glioblastoma, I believe. So I'm very hopeful that they will bring a very innovative mindset into the White House. Some of the regulations the FDA loosened in the past 4 years. So in some respects, this was a good administration for innovation. I hope that if innovations are put back, or if some of those roadblocks are put back in place, they're put back conscientiously, or maybe not put back at all, because the FDA process, expediting it in a safe and intelligent fashion is better for everyone, making it cost less. So we'll see, but I'm very hopeful that it will continue to help.
Yeah, I also agree. We will have a president, at least, who's not at least against the science, doing research. So the hope is, at least from funding side, in the next 4 years, there will be more research funding than before, because in the past, well, not only from the Trump administration, but starting from really a couple of years ago, the funding has cut to half, and also from the half cut to even more. Those, especially spin out from institution, has really suffered a lot. So I'm quite hopeful the whole funding environment would also change, and there will be more resources regarding that. But also I'm a little bit concerned regarding the general policy, the drug cost policy, because we all know the party just always trying to negotiate, trying to bring the drug price down, and that would be definitely the next thing they will do. And that is not a really good thing for the whole BioTech and also pharmaceutical company. For them, is one of the motivation. So it will kill the innovation, also motivation for the BioTech, and cripple the BioTech community. So the problem in the BioTech industry is never be the price, and you can't just simply to reference the cost to make the pill, to make the drug price. But the problem issue is the higher failure rate of the drug development. So of course, with the development of all this technology, the AI application, a lot of new technology is going to help to cut the time and also to cut the cost of the drug development, and also increase the successful rate of the drug development. But if the drug price is dropped significantly, that would certainly impact the whole industry, and then some of the pipeline may disappear. This is my personal opinion on that.
Yeah, I don't have strong view on political kind of effect on where the industry will go. I am very hopeful on the kind of pricing, manufacturing, drug discovery, from the new technologies will actually accelerate the process. And even 1 year shorter to market can mean billions of dollars in sales to a company, right? And also an additional year in terms of the patent, right? Because you have patent only for X number of years, 15 or 20, but then basically once you hit the market, usually you have about 10 years of that patent. And so that's where you can realize more value. And it's a very gentle balance, right? Like you do want to make sure that the drugs are available to people. Yet at the same time, if the price is too low, exactly, there's no incentive for companies to develop it, right? And so I do think that with the innovation and machine learning applications, for drug discovery, you see these more accelerated processes of like hitting a target or the molecule of interest and pushing it to kind of IND and then clinical trials. And you do see that already today. And I'm hopeful that that's going to accelerate even further. And on top of it, there are certain disease where it's a single mutation, right? And you potentially can develop a platform to approve a whole platform and then develop these drugs at much lower cost. So this is something that is happening today in the space. That is very fascinating and encouraging. So I do think that long term there is the ability to reduce costs of drugs to people and bring it to more people all around the world.
Great, thanks very much. That leads me to the next question I have is, where do you see investments coming from outside of the United States into US-based companies trending? Do you foresee any material change in that or not?
So maybe I can start. So when you're looking at this BioTech whole this industry in the global range, US is still the big players in this industry. 2/3 of this BioTech funding still goes to United States, and in this country, we all know California, Massachusetts, still the top two biggest hub for biotech innovations, and 60% of the funding goes to those two places. And when you look at the Asia Pacific region, and China is still the lead in the biotech sector. And actually before the pandemic, several cities in China, including Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, were the hotspot for this biotech investment outside the United States. And actually here in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco, Silicon Valley and Boston, you'll see a lot of Chinese investors also coming from the country to try to also find good deals. So later we have this COVID-19 crisis, but when you look at the number this year, there is still almost like a $2.5 billion in investment in China, in just like a purely biotech investment. And also another thing is in Hong Kong, we have this Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and that has its rule to really favor and also welcome those pre-revenue biotech company. So now also a lot of bio companies also chose to go public in China, in Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So it's already become the second most thriving market for public listing of the biotech companies. And also, when you look at Europe, after the pandemic, actually is already surpassed China, becoming the second largest biotech investment outside the United States. Almost this year, the first 3 quarters has almost $3 billion deal just to invest in the biotech, and also several the major cities that has a great biotech ecosystem, not only from the from the innovation coming from the university and the institution, but also coming from the local government, federal government, and also all those accelerators and incubators. They also have a great or build a great biotech ecosystem. The cities such as Paris, Cambridge, London, Stockholm, Sweden, those are all the big hubs. And Toronto in North America is also really great cities. So now, thanks to this virtual communication, as an investor, when we look at the deals, we would just really expand the range, and then to take advantage of all this different geography, because some great deals from those countries are with really great quality, but also in a much better price compared to the deals coming from United States. Those are all the great opportunities.
Yeah, I would add to that, and I agree with everything Ella said. I think you have to look at two sides of the coin. One is the capital, and one is the innovation. And I think that the capital, that can, I mean, that's going to be restricted by the legal obstacles of bringing money from one country to another, as well as just your contacts. How do you get in front of investors who are in the Middle East or in Asia or in Europe or South America? On the other hand, the innovation, and that's where I am a little bit more conservative, and I think Anna spoke about it earlier, is that it's ideally you invest locally because you can see people and you could look at what they're doing and you can really identify the strengths and weaknesses, based on your actual in-person experience. It is harder to invest in companies that are halfway around the world. So I suspect that you'll see more capital flow, but not as much investment that's halfway around the world.
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of the fund you are, but if you're a lead investor and you take a board seat, it becomes physically really challenging to be in 5 different countries every quarter.
Yeah.
So you do have to stay kind of concentrated. If you are just a syndicate kind of not full on syndicate investor who invests smaller check size, potentially yes, but again, usually that activity is fueled by kind of whoever is leading, right? Like if there is no lead investors, there are no syndicates. So that's kind of the dynamic, I think.
Got it. So all of you see dozens, if not hundreds of decks cross your desks every day. For founders or entrepreneurs, do you have any advice as to what's going to make your company stand out from your perspectives?
Thanks God I don't see 100 decks every day.
Yeah.
That'd be really hard.
Millions.
A year for sure, yes. Yeah, we probably see like 1,000 or so per year. But I think it's always a question, do you have a real technology and do you have real data in your deck? Like there are a lot of decks that tell a great story, kind of Disney cartoons, right? But no content. In the world of biotech, like anything STEM, we want to see data. Like what have you done? Is there in vitro? Is there in vivo? Like have you, like what are the patents? You can't just make big claims and say, well, we're working on it. We want to see exactly what is it that you have developed? Have you protected it? Have you out licensed if you need to license, or in license, sorry, if you need to license something? That is very crucial. Of course, team matters as well, and kind of the expertise, but also just understanding whether you need to hire other people, seeing kind of your own white spots where you need to add additional talent to really make this a great company.
Yeah, I'm maybe a little bit different in my approach to slide decks. I think your deck needs to tell a story, and I think the goal of the story is to get a phone call. So I personally don't like decks that are too thick or too wordy. If you've got to put, an essay on every slide, it's too much and it loses me. You should be able to communicate clearly and precisely what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you're the right team to execute this particular journey. In my mind, there are 3 problems that you need to answer. Why is this a clinical need? How does this business work and grow profitable? And how do you circumvent the financial risks that any early stage startup in biotech has? And if you can coherently, precisely tell me that story and make it, then it's still a crapshoot because it just might not be a space I'm interested in. But I think that's an important way to get your deck together. And then all of that stuff can either be in an addendum or, if I'm interested in it, then I don't mind pouring through the data, but, at first I just really want to know at a high level what you're doing.
Yeah, so I guess it's just like it really depends on investors' personal preference. So for me, I'm also really I would be more more willing to spend time on the deck that has a better format. This is just like my personal thing. If you do not even willing when you try to raise millions of dollars money from investor, but if you do not even bother to spend a couple of hours to make your pretty readable, that also can suggest something, right? So well, I have seen a lot of slides coming from, especially the team that is composed of purely scientists. Just to put a really like a small figure that doesn't really have enough wording to let us understand what's really about, and doesn't really have enough more information about a commercialization plan, doesn't really have information about a milestone. It's either just like a pure science coming from, I'm a PhD, so it's like I know how the pure, PhD style deck would look like, and that is horrible when you present it to investor. And some, on the other hand, I also see another type of the decks that is just like a full with all the stories that doesn't really have the key data. So BioTech, the type of this the deck I would prefer to open and really willing to follow up the next phone call is, first, I would like to see this is readable format, and the second thing is it does have the key component as what I mentioned. It has some. It doesn't really have to put all the data out there because we would not really have time to look into all this data from each deck. But at least you need to highlight some really key experimental data out there, right? You can't just if you're a biotech company, you need to show something. And out of all the experiment, you should be able to pick what is really important there. It's okay, you're still in the early stage because we all invest in different stage, but just to make this clear. And also, if you get a chance to talk with all these investors, you need to first understand who you will chat with. So a lot of investors are not really coming from the healthcare or medicine field. So you will just no need, and also do not use the scientific language, talk with them. But if you know you are gonna chat with some associate or managers who also coming with, who is also PhD or MD in this sector, then you want to also give out the polished data, just like get a fully prepared. Yeah.
Can I share a pet peeve? Would
Please,
that be okay?
Yeah.
So
yeah, because I know I can really literally tell when the person give a presentation coming from medicine background, whether this is a PhD or MD. MD
right.
are much better than PhD. You can definitely tell, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. But I don't
I
know.
know how to communicate, but PhD, like myself, I'm also a PhD. So it's just like a very different. This is all
very different. Well, so here's a pet peeve that I have, and I'm interested if this bothers you guys. One of the things, we're at the end of the day, you're asking me to buy something. You're asking me to buy equity or buy, take a, loan you money for a price, whatever. And they never put the price in the deck. Like, they'll say, oh, and we're raising, I just saw a presentation, I'm raising $5 million. I'm like, on what pre-money? Like, how much money is this worth? Like, I tell you, I don't even like kombucha, but I use the example. I said, look, you want to sell me kombucha? It's $3 a bottle. Okay, that's cool. If you're charging $50 a bottle, I don't want to talk to you about your kombucha. Like, it's not interesting to me. And I feel like, it's important to tell me how much, this thing costs. I know sometimes you don't have a lead, but you have an idea of where that pre-money valuation sits and how I'm going to get a return on my investment. I don't like ridiculous projections, but you can certainly look and make some kind of coherent, supportable thesis on what this looks like on a go-forward basis. I think that's very important, and I think people don't do that. That's my pet
Interesting.
peeve.
I have somewhat different view on this. I think well, maybe that works with, I don't know. I don't think that works with lead investors because it's part of the job to determine the price, right? For us to determine how much we're willing to pay. I think it definitely comes across in conversations. But it is sort of almost putting, like if you put too high of a price, you may scare away. It's sort of part of negotiation, right? You can scare away investors that really matter to you because it's not just about price, it's about who actually comes on board, who actually invests in you, how can they help you, right? Like you should really think about investors, not just like a pool of money. These are the people who will help you to build your business. And you want to attract the people who will be able to do that. And that's why you really need to understand where you need help. Like, what are your blind spots? Do you need more, capabilities around manufacturing, clinical trials? Have you done it? Because a lot of, if you are just a PhD student, you probably never worked in a pharma company. You just don't know how it's done, right? On the other hand, maybe you are a person who's been in pharma all along, but maybe you're lacking, I don't know, some other skills. So you need to really understand what are the areas you need to fill in and really look for an investor there. Like I'll give an example. We have one company, this is more agriculture space, but I think that's going to be just more clear what I mean. They make leather out of fungi, out of mycelium. And so on the one hand, they need very technical people to do that. On the other hand, they really need to hit this kind of luxury space, more marketing, more fashion people, right? So they have two sets of investors, more tech focused and investors who have invested in fashion brands before, and they can provide that capability and network, connect with people, right? So you want to make sure you have the right investors, not just the money. And because of that, I think giving a price tag may really scare away the people you really want to have on board. Because again, as part of the negotiation is going to be, what can they do for you? Like what is the price? Again, maybe they can push up the option pool, and so your dilution is not as high, even if the valuation is low. Like there are like all these different techniques that can go into the structuring of a deal, and you should really think about it as a package of a lot of different things than just a price alone. I think it's helpful to have an idea of where you can be valuing it, but for that you can just provide comps like, oh, these are the precedent transactions, or this company that's similar to us raised these X amount. So that kind of gives people where you're targeting, but again, sort of signals we're open-minded to discuss, right? Like, what is your offer?
Got it. That's really good guidance. Thank you all very much. At this stage, we're going to move on to the Q&A section of this session. For those that are participating on the Zoom call live, you can submit your questions via the Q&A tab at the middle of the screen. The first question is as follows. Has anyone seen a rise in mental health addiction treatment investment opportunities, especially given the societal shift caused by COVID-19?
I've seen a number of digital health solutions. I haven't seen anything in the pharma. Again, I think that has to do more with, as you were saying earlier, Anna, the cycle of drug discovery and testing. It's just too soon. But certainly in digital health, there's been a huge, creation of business in that area.
Yeah, I think one of the companies that I know that exactly in that space, but they started that road kind of very long time ago. Again, they are a public company, went public this year, a couple of months ago, Compass Pathway. So they actually use psychedelics to treat mental disorders, and they are going through kind of FDA and the similar agencies in other countries So I think this is, a very interesting company to look into. But yeah, this area is kind of hard to invest in a little bit, I think, but it depends on your investment thesis as well.
And also, is that referring also to neuroscience? I
We
just
can
want
include
to,
that.
huh?
Sure, we could include that, broaden the scope.
Yeah, because if that is also what the audience also trying to ask, neuroscience is, I didn't really see the particular data like investment during this time, but neuroscience is always one popular sector in the whole biotech field. Microbiome, starting from 4 years or five years ago, has been many people has found the connection of the disorder of gut microbiome colony to the neurology disorders such as Alzheimer's disease. So to connect the gut and also the brain to find out the mechanism causing all this disease, and also trying to find out trying to develop the not only the treatment plan, but also to diagnose the disease in the early stage. So that would be also one thing. And also because like brain research is always very difficult because the brain is very, very complex. And we all know like there are like tens of thousands of neurons that is just hard to, like when you do, first you can't really do biopsy in the brain, right? And also when you look at all this, doing all this research, there's just like so many type of the tissues you have to also collect. So the application of AI definitely can really help the to map the brain. There's a new brain mapping technology can also help for the drug development, and also a lot of the application, a lot of AI to track the mental issues is also becoming more and more popular.
The next question is, COVID is leading to increased work from home and follow-on facilities changes. Are you seeing changes how your companies are working? Are there opportunities to help biotech pharmas to adapt to remote collaborative work?
So maybe I can start. Yeah, so COVID-19, as we mentioned earlier, it does really change the way as an investor to communicate with a startup. We just like have to rely on this virtual communication, and also for ourselves as an investor, when we try to raise money, we also have to rely on this, Zoom or this online tools to bond with the investors for the fund, and then trying to get the new funding. And no matter whether you are the investor, no matter whether you're an investor to invest in fund or you're an investor to invest in the portfolio company. So now the current the pattern or trend is those LP or the investors are more willing to double down their investment in the existing portfolios or the fund they are familiar with. So it's more and more difficult for fund or for startup company to look for the new funding at this stage. So this is something is changing. But also, as I mentioned, for instance, we our company, we have a different site in outside the United States. We have site in Israel. We have also site in London. So I just really realized after the COVID-19, we have more communication to look at the deals altogether. So this is all the change I have observed.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, do you have any additional comments on that, or Dr. Aloni Chara?
Yeah, I don't have any additional comments. I think this is pretty comprehensive. Thank you, Ella.
Yeah, very much so. Does anyone else participating live have additional questions they'd like to put to the panel?
I think there's a question on the bottom there in the
Yeah.
chat. if there's a group of 100 AI scientists, coders, what company would you like them to create to be acquired by you or someone you know?
Well, if I was going to acquire the company, it could not be very expensive. So I would say just to get the coffee exactly right.
Yeah. I guess the question is basically, if you have this talent, what should they work to make an impact? Because we probably wouldn't buy a whole company. We invest and buy a part of a company, but again, at the right valuation and for the right ownership. There are a lot of things that they account.
There's a lot going on there. I think that first you have to define what AI can do and what it can't do. I'm not sure. To me, AI is more of a diagnostic tool that learns and gets better, or a discovery tool that can find drugs and things like that, rather than a therapeutic tool. I'm trying to think of an example where AI would be therapeutic, and it's escaping me.
I think drug discovery is part of the therapeutic process, right? Like,
but it's not a therapeutic in itself, in other words, right? You're not using AI to get somebody better. You're using it to discover a drug. So if I was going to then dig deeper on that, I think that just more, looking at things like stroke prevention and, heart attack prevention, diabetes management. I think if you look at the big diseases, I think that's one thing. Another thing that would be really interesting is trying to, we have a problem. So the problem in venture capital is that everything ultimately gets propelled by the lure of money, right? It's a capitalistic structure. And I mean, it's good, it's bad, it is what it is. But you have a lot of orphan diseases that people suffer from that are not big. And so will that be lucrative? If you can fix diabetes, or you can fix some weird genetic disease that affects one person in a million, it's somebody's putting up a challenge at me. Thank you. So what are you going to do? And so I think that if you could have AI that was obviously really, really good, where, since we're fantasizing, that could solve either by doing drug discovery or even genetic manipulation using CRISPR or something for these orphan diseases that don't necessarily get the attention that, are reflective of the impact they have on the individuals. I think that would be lovely.
I'll just add one point to this, is that you need also to have business people in addition to coders and scientists, because you can create an amazing product, but there is no application for it to earn money, right? And in that case, you can still make it, you just probably gonna have to fund it yourself. If you want to attract venture capital money, you really need to think about what is the market opportunity here. Because I'm just looking at some of the things you listed here, like the AI for document recognition and computer vision, and kind of the robotics and factories. I think that there are definitely good business models. Generally, like if you think about diagnostics, it's a little harder, or especially medical devices tools, harder proposition, because it's a more competitive space, and you really need to have people who are great sales people to really go to every doctor, physician, surgeon, to really sell this, convince them that this product is better than anything else. You have to make sure that the insurance covers it. And there are like so many other things that go into account, right? It's not just make a product and it's gonna fly off. If anything, very often it's a push strategy rather than pull demand. Versus therapeutics, most of it is a pull demand. Like people are sick, people are dying, and you need a product, the drug, and people are willing to pay a lot of money to extend life, even for like a few months. So maybe this sounds a little harsh, but this is, how I guess business works and how people think from kind of profit perspective. Ideally, if you combine the two worlds, of course.
Great. Next question is, what tools are available to caretakers who want to know the drug interactions, side effects of patients who mix Eastern and Western medicines, especially when there is a language barrier?
What tools?
I'm not seeing a question. Can you?
Sure, it's in the Q&A section.
Yeah. So I'll just say that I probably don't know the answer to that because we focus more on the kind of drugs side rather than tools. But I think it is an interesting question.
I'll take it as a doc. I'll put my doctor hat on, which is that if you're using a lot of medications at home, or you're taking care of someone who's on a number of medications, and then you're adding other medications, whether they're Eastern or homeopathic or just, from GNC or whatever, it would be good to talk to your physician, your treating physician, and make sure they have a complete list of what those medications are, because there are interactions and they can be negative. And I would just say the more complicated your medical history, the more careful you should be about bringing in things that there aren't good research around.
Yeah.
Yep. The next question is, I know some drugs exacerbate the onset of new mental health conditions. In the testing of new drugs and vaccines, will testing include impact to mental health?
Yes, it includes all sorts of things that they look at in terms of complications and mental health, and that could be organically driven. So that's an important component.
Yeah, I think it also is important to consider what type of disease this is. I think in many cases, if it is a question whether you die or live or you develop mental issue, right? I think people will still get prone to let's approve it because the side effect, I mean, it depends. It's a little harder, but again, if it's really a detrimental issue, I think the benefits outweigh the side effects. Does it make sense?
Well, but they look for it, and then at least, if not anything else, it gets shared so that the treating physicians and the families are aware of it. I don't recall the drug specifically, but there were some, anti-psychotropic drugs or antidepressants that showed an increased rate in suicide in teens. And so it was no longer, I believe, approved for teens, just adults.
For example, I think there's I keep confusing Propecia, the hair loss for men. The side effect is impotency, for example, and still a lot of people take it because, I guess the benefit of that, if you stop taking it and you had this side effect, it will be reversed. So people are willing to take the risk as well. But it is important to outline all of the side effects.
Let's see, it looks like we lost Chris, so I'll read the list, you guys. Somebody has a medical food product effective in stopping early and mid-stage. I'm assuming AD is Alzheimer's disease, patient deterioration. Don't have the resources to advance to phase 3 clinical study. Would anybody interested in taking over? Is anybody interested in taking over? No, not here. Sorry. But good luck.
I mean, I would just say that if they gotten that far and they have positive data, they should probably have demand on this, right? I can only imagine that the data is not conclusive if there's no uptake.
And if there was, again, we only read the question, so I don't want to assume anything, but if there's really like a lot of there and there's a funding issue, there are not-for-profits who work in the space. There's definitely people that would be interested in the venture space if it really, as you said, had the research behind it. And there are academic centers that might be interested in looking into it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So are we questioned out? Does anybody have any questions for us?
There's 2 more questions.
Okay, I don't see those. Why don't you
No,
read them?
we addressed them in the
No,
very.
that's not. Yeah.
Sorry, Al, I'm back on.
Chris.
So we were able to go over the questions.
My apologies.
No worries.
Okay.
Well, if we have no additional questions, does anyone have any parting thoughts on innovations in biotech, whether or not with respect to the current state of the world? Or
I'll just mention that there's, I think we haven't really touched upon different types of kind of biotechnology companies. And there are more traditional biotech companies that are the pipeline or the spec pharma, whatever you call it. But this is single asset or a portfolio of assets, each sort of found individually. And there's a newer way of kind of more tech approach where you leverage machine learning and AI to accelerate that process by building a platform that will basically assist you in finding the insights, right? And identifying the molecules of interest for different types of indications, or maybe it's a platform that can actually find new targets for different types of disease. And this is a very interesting area because it promises a lot of acceleration in the drug discovery and development process. And again, faster time to market means more patient life saved and also potentially lower cost of drugs. So yeah, I think I'm very hopeful about the space, and if you guys, the attendees interested in this, you should totally check it out and learn more about what's happening in the space.
Ella, do you have any parting words, Ella?
Yeah, so it's just like there's a lot of great technology out there compared to a decade ago that can definitely help to accelerate the whole in life science, the drug development process, and also in other field, because basically today we're quite focused on the medicine perspective of biotech, but actually when you're talking about biotech, it also included the clean energy, the agriculture, other perspective. So there's a lot of great technology out there where the trend of bioenergy is also becoming more and more popular to replace the chemical counterparts. And there's also bioplastics that are also being developed to help decrease the consumption of the plastic that would enter ocean and cause all this pollution. We have also more medical device to help the lab work, such as those microfluidics, 3D cell culture system, work on the chip. Those things can 10 years ago or 7 years ago, it's just a very difficult to, for instance, to conduct an experiment with such little sample and then to be able to detect so much functions in that such one little thing. And also there are also interesting potential of the organelle that endogenous exist in our body, but we want to have a even fully or a better advantage. One example is the application of exosome. A lot of, including cell therapy and also gene therapy, one of the barrier or challenge is how to deliver the target or the active molecules to your target in the tissue. And exosome, definitely I see it will become a really a really popular area, can help to deliver all this drug to not only deliver but also release in a more controlled and also specific manner. So those are definitely I see what is gonna happen, and also some of them already happening in the biotech sectors.
I have one quick thought to add before we go, which is that I was very encouraged by the conscious inclusion of diverse backgrounds in some of the vaccine studies that I reviewed. And I think it's really important for this group who are, in the drug discovery and, through the commercialization pathway to consider that we need to ensure that our clinical trials are representative of all walks of life and not just a specific walk of life. And that's probably a win-win, because if you can prove efficacy among many racial groups, then you will have a better and more effective treatment for those people. So I like that. I want to just have a call to action to consider that as you do your clinical trial designs. And then the very last thing I wanted to say was that the sum total of all of this work, even though we're here talking about venture capital and making returns on investment, it's great work. I think, speaking probably for all of us, we're very passionate about helping people, about making a difference, and about in this little way changing the world. And everybody here, I think, probably shares that ideal, and I am very grateful for it. We've gotten to see this in real time as these vaccines have been developed for COVID. And so I just encourage you to go out there and do these things. It's great work, and it really helps and makes a difference. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much to our panelists. We are just about out of time, but before we go, I'd like to give each of the panelists an opportunity to provide their contact information in case any of you listening would like to reach out to them. Anna, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn would be great contact for me. Just ping me or send a message.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is also a good way to get me. I check LinkedIn from time to time, pretty frequent.
LinkedIn is great for me too, but there are lots of Oren Aloni Cherises out there, so it might be hard to find me. No, LinkedIn is great, but I also put my email in the chat, so you can feel free to shoot me an email if you'd like, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you for hosting us today, Chris. It was great.
Absolutely. And again, I'm Chris Simpson. I'm a venture attorney at Pulsanelli PC. I can also be reached on LinkedIn. My email address is available if you Google me. It's also capital CSIMPSON at POLSINELLI.com.
Thank you.
So we will be signing off. Thanks everyone for participating and listening in on this call. It's been really insightful. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.